Greetings, friends. Paul Thompson here as we continue our conversations around the book of Acts, the power of the Holy Spirit. And today we come to a fascinating story that kind of blows my mind and makes me nervous on a certain level. And really theologically is one of these where most preachers, we kind of shrug our shoulders and don't know that we can fully explain. But today, Steve, if you remember from yesterday, we were talking about a group of people, the apostles and the community were so invested in what God was doing that they were willing even to go sell possessions, houses, land. Mm-hmm. And the Bible tells us that they would bring that and lay it at the feet of the apostles because they knew that the community was going to be blessed. The community was going to meet the needs of the poor, of the needy, of those who were struggling. And so they were excited about participating in that. But we get to this fascinating story at the beginning of chapter 5. Steve, walk us through that.
Well, let me start by saying Ben Nobles, who is our minister to our students, is preaching this week, and I'm really glad that he's got this.
Not you, right?
Not me.
Yeah.
I'm running away from it. No, this story is about two folks, a couple, Ananias and Sapphira. They see everything's happening in the community, and they sell a piece of property, and they come and lay it at the apostles' feet, except they hold some back. And it's not the holding back that's the problem. It's that they represent themselves falsely to the community and to God. They want to get the same, well done, right? Maybe they want their name on a pew or a memorial plaque somewhere, and they act as if they've given everything, but they haven't. So they misrepresent themselves, and immediately, and this is interesting. Peter goes from being able to heal to being able to read people's minds.
Oh yeah,
right.
Now, if somebody whispered in his ear,
I guess,
how he knows, but he figures it out that Ananias has been less than truthful,
right,
and hasn't brought the whole proceeds of the sale.
And he's like, what has possessed you? What is Satan, the evil one? What has he done to you to convince you to lie to the Holy Spirit? And I think that language is important because the lie is to the Holy Spirit. It is also to the community, but Peter doesn't say to me, why have you lied to the Holy Spirit? Don't you know that it was your property and when you owned it, there was no problem? And could you not have done what you wanted to with it?
Steve, what do you think caused Ananias to do that? Obviously, we can call it Satan, but what do you think was going on in Ananias' mind and spirit that he would be moved to lie about this?
I think he wanted to keep up with the Joneses. We got a couple of Joneses in our church, and nobody wants to keep up with the Joneses. I'm just kidding. But to keep up with, I think that's kind of that idea. He wants to keep up with the others. He wants to look good. He wants to be esteemed in other people's eyes, but yet he's not willing to fully trust God. So he wants the recognition and the adulation without the sacrifice. And the result of this is...
So he falls out
dead.
Now, this would be one of those moments where as a pastor you go, folks, I don't know that I can understand it. God strike him dead? Was this just one of those crazy things that happened because of guilt, shame, whatever the case may be? But he got caught on the carpet and he falls out dead.
Well, and it reads, you did not lie to us, but to God. Now, when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died. A great fear seized all who heard of it, of course.
You think?
And then the young men came and wrapped up his body, then carried him out and buried him. So evidently that's what the youth group did in the first century.
Yeah, they came and pulled out the dead bodies.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And then it gets worse.
And then it gets worse because he has a wife by the name of Sapphira.
And this is an interval of about 3 hours. She doesn't know that her husband has died.
Right. So she comes in, and what happens to Sapphira?
Well, I'll just read it to you. Peter says, "Tell me whether you and your husband sold the land for such and such a price." And she said, "Yes, that was the price." Then Peter said to her, "How is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. And immediately she fell down at his feet and died. And then the youth group comes back.
The youth group comes back, drags her off.
Carries her out.
And
I hope they got some fundraising in.
Yeah, I hope they.
I mean, our youth group do.
I've
had youth groups do car washes and
they're
bake
doing
sales.
undertaking.
I didn't know they did undertaking and burials. So that's.
So we don't mean to make fun or light of this story, but I
if
think
we don't laugh, we'll cry.
Right, because it is an incredulous story from the standpoint of two people who
and I love
who conspired and lied.
Right, and I love the way it ends. It just ends chapter 5, verse 11, and great fear seized the whole church and all who heard of these things.
Yeah.
Probably the most successful stewardship campaign they ever did.
And so the reality is I think this calls us all into question about our commitment to God, especially as it comes to our stewardship. And I think we all have this tendency to want to look good in the eyes of others. I think we all want to have the name on the room. We all want to have the name on the plaque. We want people to see us as generous benefactors of God's work.
But there's also something, too, about the harm this does. And what I mean by that is there's so many folks who stay away from the church because they don't think they're good enough. Are we really who we fully are before God? Or are we afraid to let each other see that? One of the things, we have a good friend who serves a church up in Winston-Salem, and one of their core values, oddly enough, is we will not wear masks, which has been kind of ironic during the season of COVID, right? But the idea is we will be who we really are with each other and with God. And in the life of the church, it's so easy to put on our best self, to come in and be something that we're not, because we're afraid that if people saw who we really were, that they may not like us or love us, and that they may judge us. And that, oddly enough, is so destructive to the community because it keeps people away. And maybe that's at the heart of this, is that when we are not honest with who we are, what we're dealing with, and when we put on masks, when we misrepresent ourselves, it is detrimental to the church, even to the point that God's willing to call us home because we have it's evidently a pretty grievous offense.
I remember back at the first church that I served on my own, and there was a couple who told me a story, and they had started attending the church. They really were struggling. Early business were struggling, a young couple. And they said one day they decided that they were going to put God to the test. and they wrote a check that they really couldn't afford to write, and they put it in the church offering plate. And just said, Lord, this is a test. And I'm not sure how smart that was, but on Monday they opened their mail and there was a check that had come in that they had been owed from way back, maybe one of those taxes or something like that. And they understood in that perspective that for them, that was the answer that God had given to them, that their generosity, that their willingness to even test God in the giving, that God had answered that prayer and shown them. I'm not sure I have that kind of faith, but I sure hope and believe that God is faithful, that when we do bring the best that we can give, God will honor that.
Well, a story I just shared with our staff this week. By the end of the first quarter, Denver United Methodist Church was 16% behind where we were this time last year. If you want to get your pastor's attention, that got my attention.
That gets you a little nervous.
And so we talked about it in our finance committee meeting. And what's going on? Why is this the case? Concern. But we had a surplus from the previous year of $27,000. And the finance committee recognized we were behind, but that we also have an obligation to be faithful. And so the finance committee voted to tithe on the surplus when we were 16% behind. So we took $2,700 and we gave it to ministries outside of our church. We gave some to the Child Advocacy Center. We gave some to a special project in Guatemala. So it went away from us. And I was so proud of our finance committee and for the administrative board to approve to give away money even when we were running behind. But to me, it was a significant amount. Right now, we're less than 5% behind budget. Now, the congregation responded to being made aware of the situation, but I think that's something about doing the right thing, stepping towards God's generosity and faithfulness in a way that says, I really trust you're going to take care of this and you're going to figure this out, Lord, and so I can step in faith towards you. So thank you for stepping up in faith. And
to the people of Huntersville United Methodist Church, we too running somewhat behind. With 2020 was an awesome year. 2021 hasn't been as good, but I think what we want to leave you with today in this story that is unnerving about Ananias and Sapphira is that
catch up on your pledges.
is that God knows we can't hide from God. We can't fool God. We can't convince God of something that's not true.
And be fully who you are before God and each other, and that's always enough.
And trust God, and then through your community of faith, make sure you have the correct information, but trust the community of faith that you have to do the right thing. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. We're so grateful for your time, and we look forward to the next week's conversation.
Absolutely. Have a great week.
Thank you.